Today's question actually comes from a number of people that I've had conversations with this past week that have asked me something along the lines of a question about the Antichrist or the mark of the beast. These are questions that come up whenever there are crises as Christians try to grapple with the end times and prophecy and understanding apocalyptic literature. And it really centers on a section of the book of Revelation. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is the mark of the beast and the beasts themselves, the two beasts in Revelation. Revelation is a difficult book to interpret. It's apocalyptic literature, which means we have to interpret it differently and read it differently than we would narrative, like the Gospels, or letters, many of the New Testament books, or historical literature or poetic literature. Apocalyptic literature is its own genre. Now, in Revelation in particular, there are different streams of theology that interpret the book differently and dictate whether you read the book as a chronology of events that happen sequentially, or whether it is a book that is talking about the end of days and has different, almost like different facets of a prism or a diamond that you're looking at in different ways over the same events. I tend to read it in more the second way, that it's describing the end of days in apocalyptic imagery and showing us different snapshots and facets of what will happen, and that has a purpose for the Church of Jesus Christ throughout all time as we are anticipating and looking ahead to the return of Christ, which is in anticipation throughout the New Testament, that Jesus is going to return, that he is going to renew and restore all things, making all things new for his own glory, that he will be the king and ruler over all things, and is in fact now, but we'll see that in its fullness in the new heavens and the new earth. And the times in between his resurrection and his ascension and his return is the church age that we live in now. Now, understanding that, it begins to influence how you interpret these things. And so when we read Revelation 12 about the woman and the dragon, there's this imagery of Satan's pursuit to try to destroy Christ that was unsuccessful, but that the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And so that is saying that Satan is postured against God's people for all time, that he is trying to destroy and kill those who worship Christ and who have been redeemed by Jesus. Now then, it talks about two beasts in Revelation chapter 13. This is where things get interesting. That the first beast, it's an image of authority, and this is imagery that's also used and drawn from Daniel in apocalyptic literature in Daniel, particularly chapter 7. And so the first beast is authority to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling and all those who dwell in heaven. He also was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. All authority was given to it. And so this first beast is a ruler who has all authority and stands against Christ and his kingdom and his people. The second beast is more focused on ideology. It speaks like the dragon, it has Satan's words within it, and yet it has great signs, and people are drawn to the second beast. And it causes also then, it talks about this, that it causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who is understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. So now I've got your attention. Because we know this, we've heard this idea, and 666 as a number is one that we see used by Satanists, and if you see a phone number with 666 in it, we immediately kind of go like, ooh, I don't like that number. And so this is the question, is what are these beasts? What are these marks? What is it? And it's led people to some really fearful things. And so people get into and caught up in all kinds of conspiracy theories about who this might be, and have tried to identify the Antichrist for generations. Every American president that in my lifetime, and likely in yours, has been identified by somebody as this is the Antichrist. Which may or may not square actually biblically, but we're always looking out for it. And so you'll hear this with people talking about conspiracies about in the end there's going to be microchips embedded in our bodies, or there's going to, this is why we have to be scared of certain things, and always a suspicion and looking for not making sure that we don't get duped into taking the mark of the beast. And so let's try to cut in a little bit and understand what is being said in this text and the point of it for us, because I think there's some clarity for us. When it's talking here, it's talking about the pursuit of Satan against the people of God. And it's talking about authority that is set up that is anti-Christ, the first beast stands explicitly against Christ's kingdom and blasphemes God and is allowed to make war against his saints and to conquer them. And so this is saying that throughout the church's experience, there will be rulers, authoritarian rulers, who stand explicitly against God's people to their destruction. This exists on earth today, and we can look back in the past and see how it has existed in the past, as there have been human rulers that take up Satan's kingdom for themselves in attacking and pursuing the destruction of God's people, rather than reflecting Christ's kingdom. Now, the second beast is smoother than that. He's more convincing than that. And that there are some leaders and some rulers that are able to point to great economic gains and things that they do, that they accomplish, that people like, but they still stand against God's people. And so we see this again, even today, that there are those who are in positions of leadership within this world, who have power in this world, who utilize their power in anti-Christ ways, to not reflect the power and glory and beauty of Christ's kingdom and biblical justice and truth, but instead to undercut those things and explicitly against God's people. And so this is true even in the public square right now in the secular West, that to be a Christian, to believe in Christ, we're told at times that there's no place in the public square for that we need to be neutral, but neutral is anything that is not Christ, and so there's a removal from it. But this still gets to the question of, what is the mark? What is this thing that the mark of the beast that will be on people's foreheads and right hands, and that calls for wisdom? And what is this thing about 666? Well, I think it's helpful here, again, to read in context. Satan is pursuing the destruction of the people of God, that there will be human rulers and authorities that also have those pursuits and stand against Christ and his kingdom. But on the other hand, in chapter 14, the very next verse, then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. See, there's a mark here, that the name of Christ and the name of God is written on those who are Christ's. And the name of the beast is written on the foreheads, marking those who belong to him. So what this means is that there will be anti-Christian rulers and powers that are seeking the destruction of people, particularly of those who bear the name of Christ, that will demand loyalty and mark people and reward people who give them their loyalty. That there will be badges and symbols and tokens that they take on. And we can imagine these things in other contexts if we imagine, and we know this happens in cycle. And so there was in Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm, who rose up in power, and then World War I, he was removed, and it's not like the void lasted long. And then the Third Reich came up, and Hitler, and there was symbol and imagery and ways for people to mark their loyalty to him. And so we can imagine these things. But let me reassure you of one thing. You will not be duped into taking the mark of the beast. It's not going to happen to you by surprise. This is a marker that you belong not to Christ, but that your loyalty is aligned more with power in this world than with his kingdom. So don't think also that this is something that we can only see in the past. It happens now, and we need to be leery of any demands of loyalty that remove or stand in contrast to our loyalty to Christ's kingdom. And this gets to the number 666. There's all kinds of thoughts on this too, as people try to break it down, and numerology, where people say, well, the Hebrew for Nero Caesar is, if you add up the numbers in the Hebrew alphabet and the number value of them, then you end up with 666. And so this is an attack of John against Nero as Caesar. I just don't buy it. I think what we do know in Revelation is that the number 7 is particularly meaningful as a number that represents God and completeness and his fullness, the sevenfold Spirit of God. And we also know that in Hebrew, to say something 3 times is to emphasize it, which is why we read over and over again, God is holy, but he is not just one time holy, he is holy, holy, holy. And so the way that I take the number 666 is that Satan and those who serve him by rejecting Christ will always fall short of God's perfection. So 666 is in essence saying, always falling short, always falling short, always falling short of the glory of God. And so all of this is given to us. Why? Well, it tells us right in the text. This calls for wisdom. It takes wisdom to navigate this world. It takes wisdom even as we look ahead to the return of Christ on how to live as in his kingdom and as his witnesses now. But right in the middle of chapter 13, between the description of the 2 beasts, it says, here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. And so as we read these things, the response is not to drift into conspiracy theories and fear, to try to figure out where the mark of the beast might be coming from so we can avoid it so that our salvation isn't taken from us. No, if you're a Christian, rest. Christ has saved you. You've been marked with his name, and nothing else can take that away from you. And so the call to us here is so that we can have wisdom as we navigate this world, and so that it's a call for the endurance and the faith of the saints. Jesus Christ is the King over all. There is no power here that should demand our loyalty beyond our primary loyalty to him. We are sojourners and exiles who are called to love the world around us and to live in light of the values of Christ's kingdom, knowing that he will come again and make all things new. So don't be afraid. You're not going to be duped into the mark of the beast. I hope that's helpful for you. If you have a question, you can feel free to submit it online. We'd love to be able to interact with you and be able to answer more questions. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll hope to see you soon.